If we have the right tackle, it makes the job of swinging flies in the cold water time of year much more efficient and effective. Let's talk about our gear. First thing is, the water's cold, we've got to get the fly down. That means sink tips. The sink tips are heavy and hard to cast. It's winter time or spring, so we have rivers that are often swollen by rain. So that means larger flies. So we need sink tips, larger flies, because the water's cold and often the water's big. To deliver a sink tip and large flies, that's where the right fly line comes into play. Typically, a Skagit fly line is one of the best choices for delivering a sink tip and a large fly. Skagit line is a shooting head line. It's a big, thick line that will deliver a large fly and a sink tip. The sink tip is an integral part of our approach for cold water steelhead. Typically speaking, a sink tip is made of tungsten or lead. Generally, what I use for most steelhead conditions are a 10-foot sink tip, T11 being one of my favorite choices for all-around winter steelhead action. The T series stands for tungsten. So this one, for example, is a T11. That means it's 11 grains per foot. 10 feet long, it's 110 grains. This series of sink tips is very effective, and one of my go-to favorite sink tips is a 10-foot T11. Now, if I wanted a little bit lighter sink tip, I'm snagging up with the T11, I need to change out to maybe a T8. This is 8 grains per foot. Now, where this gets really confusing is knowing what my sink rates are. My sink rate for a T8 is maybe 6 to 7 inches per second. Now, that gets real confusing compared to a Type 8. The Type series is another style of sink tip. These are lead-based sink tips. The lead-based sink tips sink at, a Type 8 sinks at 8 inches per second. So it's important first that you know how fast your sink tip is sinking. You want to know which one you've got. Really common for guys to show up in my boat. We're going to go out and fish for the day. I said, first question I asked, what sink tip do you have? I don't know. That's a really important thing. We got to know what sink tip we have so we can really start to dial in our fly.
Selecting the right sink tip weight and length can be complicated. Since it's often the case in fly fishing, manufacturers have not agreed upon a common language. Most simply, we suggest you have 3 tips, one for slow and or shallow, medium speed and depth, and fast and or deep waters. In the Type series, a Type 3, 6, and 8 would do, or in the T series, a T8, T11, and T14 would cover your needs. As far as the length of the tip goes, Rob recommends 10 to 12.5 footers. The key is to have a small selection and learn how they fish in a variety of water types.
Now, sink tips are easily connected to the Skagit fly line by a loop connections. These are great because we can adjust our sink tip as the conditions change throughout the season. The sink tip loops on at the end of the Skagit line. This loop connection makes it easy to adjust and change your sink tip from spot to spot or throughout the season as required by changing water conditions. The sink tip length is important. A 10-foot sink tip will cast well and fish well through a variety of water conditions and water types. Longer sink tips are often easily snagged up on the bottom when we have a lot of structure we're fishing around. So the length of your sink tip is very dependent on the type of water you're fishing as well as the length of your rod. Many casters find it difficult to cast a sink tip that's longer than the length of the rod. Now, on the other end of the sink tip, the business end of things is really important. Generally, I found the best system is to tie on a short butt section with a perfection loop on either end, and then moving directly to a 10 or 12 pound test tippet material. The thinner the line, the more it sinks through the water column, then the better it gets down. And that's an important ingredient for our swung fly success when the water's cold. If we have a long tapered leader like we'd use during the summer, the mass and resistance of the fly will resist sinking. The sink tip will work its way down, but that fly will still be up out of the zone. So keep your leader short. Overall leader length is typically about 3 feet long for the swung fly approach in the winter. We want to get that fly down. A short leader is imperative to helping us keep that fly deep. That all-important connection to the fly is where I love to put on a fixed loop knot. The fixed loop knot helps the fly have added animation and motion in the water. Let me show you how to tie that knot. It's a quick and easy knot. Trim off the extra one there. First, I'm going to start with an overhand knot. The overhand knot is the end of the tippet material. I bring it down to about 1/8 of an inch. It's going to be approximately the size of the loop that we're left over with when we tie the finished knot. So the next stage is to thread the fly onto the leader, and then we're going to take this tag and go back into that loop. It's important the way that we go into that loop, and then we pull that right up to the loop nice and snug like so, but we're not moving or changing the size of the loop here. So the fly again is resting right at that loop. From this point, I'll wrap like a clinch knot above the loop. Give it about 4 or 5 wraps and go back in through the main loop that we formed initially. Now here it's important that we moisten this with a little saliva, wet it, and then pull it tight. I always use my teeth to pull on the tag, my left hand on the fly, and right hand to pull on the leader. Wet the knot and then pull it tight, using my teeth, my third hand on the tab here, and then pulling on the fly and the tippet material. A quick snap will get that nice and tight and help hold the loop size that you selected. You should have a tag coming off the bottom of the knot. The loop stays nice size. It's important not to have too large of a loop. As you're first learning to tie this knot, the loop size is easily enlarged. So we want to keep that loop fairly small so it doesn't wrap around the material and the parts of the fly. Now I've got a big tag here. I'm going to trim that off and then we'll be ready to go. And that gives you a good, solid, fixed loop knot. The fly is a very important part of our overall arsenal. First of all, for fly selection, I like to have flies that move, that have allure and draw, that swim and look alive in the water. I don't want them looking like a stick, hanging on the end of the line. I want them to swim and move and look alive in the water. So materials like ostrich herl, marabou, rhea, different material that's going to move and look alive in the water is one place that I start for my fly selection. Now fly size, color, and weight are all other variables that play into your swung fly success. Weighted flies were good to help get the fly down deeper. Unweighted flies, great in those long flats where you can dial in the depth with the sink tip alone. So I like to have a selection of flies from unweighted through heavily weighted that will help me get the fly down to the proper depth. So first I'll have an unweighted fly, good to have with you at all times. Next I like to have a cone head. Cone head adds just a little bit of weight. Then we start to move through the paces with a small or mini lead eye. Small lead eye, medium or even large lead eye. As far as the size of the flies go, common sizes of 2.5 to 3.5 inches long overall fly size. And one thing I found very important with steelhead flies is that the hook is at the back of the fly. So if you tie your own flies, for example, I love to have a fly pattern like this where when that fish grabs the fly, that hook's going to be at the back. I found that to be the most successful. Now, one of the ways that I like to tie my steelhead patterns are with shanks. So I've got a hook shank in here, and then I've got a stinger hook off the back. So I've got a shank up front and a stinger in the back. This is a size 2 gamakatsu hook, a short shank hook that doesn't have a lot of leverage when you're fighting that fish. So it hooks and stays very well. Another benefit of having this wire adding on my short shank hook is that I can change out this hook. It's winter, I've been trying to get that fly nice and deep. I've been getting hung up on the bottom. I've had to sharpen up that hook point several times. It's time for a new hook. Instead of throwing away the fly, I can simply take this hook off, unloop it, loop on a new hook, and it's like having a brand new fly. Colors is an important part of our steelhead approach. Now, I have my favorites. Many anglers have theirs. One of the keys is have confidence in the fly you're using. And what I try to look for is matching the color of the fly to the conditions of the water clarity. Does the water have a lot of sediment in it, reducing the visibility? That's a key component when it comes to fly color selection. If I've got a reduced visibility and a lot of green in the water, this is one of my favorite patterns. It has pink and orange, a lot of bright flash to it, so fish can see it well even in reduced visibility. As the water clears, I'll tend to go to smaller and darker flies. Some of my favorite combinations for that in-between zone are black and pink or black and blue. As the water gets clearer, I'll tend to go to smaller and darker flies like these here. In between, a variety of colors will work. Purples, reds, pinks, and some of my favorites are combinations of blacks, blues, and cerise pink colorations. So for colors in general, I like a selection of darker flies to brighter flies. I like to have contrast and movement in the fly. So black fly patterns mixed all the way to brighter pinks and oranges, pinks and whites and reds. That span of colors is a really good range to have in your fly box with you so you can cover just about any winter and spring fishing situation that you encounter.